You're one of the prime examples of that because you started off you're from Singapore, and then you started a few companies in
And
the UK, right? And then you're now in Bali. So let's start with your journey there, from Singapore, then to the UK, and then wherever else.
definitely. So I grew up in Singapore, half Singaporean, half British. Went to school till I was 15 there, then went to boarding school or high school in the UK. Whilst I was in school, was building different websites and apps since I was like 13. Ran a popular like studying platform. Also ran like a video conferencing platform when I was 16. And after school, I chose not to go to university because a few of my apps and platforms were doing quite well, and started a social network as something for fun. And then it got 25,000 users the first weekend, and then
Wow.
grew to a few million users, and was one of the top social networks in the UK. Sold a video conferencing app around that time. It was very similar to Zoom or Skype, offering like encrypted video calling. And yeah, I guess my passion has been to sort of create and build things, mostly in the technology space. Now we're focused on Unit.Ventures,
Hmm.
which is helping people find work. So we power a few different marketplaces, similar to Airbnb or Uber, where we help people find work and jobs, and people who are looking to hire, like say a yoga teacher, a coach, a book an artist, find a property. We basically make that connection. And I guess the really cool thing is that the ownership of the platform is not just held by the co-founders like myself,
Yeah.
investors. It's also held by the customers and the employees.
Okay.
So we believe that's like the progression in terms of where the economy is headed.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that first, but I also wanted to talk about your experiences doing business in Southeast Asia and particularly Bali, because I heard last time you're building a whole village, a whole community here in Bali, right? Do you have time to take us on a tour later?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
So
I'm
yeah,
yeah.
so we can do that. We can, oh yeah, go on, sorry.
No, please answer.
No, I was just going to say, depending on how we break up the session, you can give us a tour later, so we can talk about doing business in Southeast Asia and Bali a little bit later if you want. So you can wrap that up with the tour. So right now we can talk about Unit.Ventures if you want.
Well, I think it could be really nice to dive into like why Bali or places like this are such an amazing place. I feel
Yeah,
to.
of course. Let's do that.
So I've lived in about like 8 capitals, so like Shanghai, Hong Kong, New York, spent some time in San Francisco and London, in Berlin also a lot of time, and also places um, like Thailand or in Koh Phangan or Phuket or Bangkok or Bali. And what I've found is that the quality of life in a place like Bali is just so much higher. People are happier. It's much less expensive. In places like London, most people are kind of just surviving in the sense that their rent is super high. They're commuting like an hour to get to work or back from work. And one thing I really love about somewhere like Bali and um, for instance Thailand is people are just happy. You know, they've got time to do things they enjoy. Um, the work that they're doing, they really love to do. They're not complaining about like several different things all the time. So yeah, I really enjoy it. And also the group of people, like the community here, I feel is really strong, and also extremely talented people. Like top entrepreneurs and investors in the world have like decided to move here or spend lots of time. So
Yeah, and you talk about community now. Now, are you talking about like when you say you spend time with the community? Are you talking about the locals or your fellow expats that have sort of seen the same thing as you have?
I think it's a combination. So I think one thing nice about Bali is many of the locals are quite integrated. So if, like, for instance, we organize a bunch of conferences or meetups or talks or discussions, and you do get a lot of locals who are participating and sort of inspiring the expats, and also the expats are inspiring the locals. So I think it's quite synergistic. I'm really looking forward for this to sort of blend and merge together more nicely and fluidly.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious about the quality of life here in Bali or Southeast Asia in terms of the cost of living being cheaper and obviously the weather, you're next to the beach and all like that. Are there any other strategic advantages from a business standpoint in terms of setting up here?
Definitely, I think the huge market. So, for instance, Indonesia is the fourth biggest country in the world in terms of population. So it's a huge, like, growing domestic market. Also around the region in terms of Southeast Asia, Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Malaysia, Thailand, like you mentioned, Singapore and Hong Kong are huge financial hubs. I used to work at one of the top funds in Europe, and I think many of the funds in Europe and the US are coming to Asia to raise money from investors, and startups are thinking, okay, like, we need to get like investors from China or Singapore or Hong Kong or yeah. So there's a lot of access to financing here. Amazingly talented people who cost like a fraction of what they would in Silicon Valley or in London. So yeah, lots of advantages, and nature, I think, is a huge plus.
So Unit.Ventures, would you say it's headquartered in Bali?
I don't think we're headquartered anywhere, actually. So this
Okay.
village that I guess we have like a presence in Singapore, Bali. We're building this village to kind of showcase what we believe the future global economy to look like. So we do have a very strong presence here. Though we have about like 35 people on our team, and it's well distributed. Though many of our core team members do spend a lot of time here, or like coming here in the next few weeks. So yeah.
Yeah, so talk about how you've decided, you mentioned your team being spread across the world. How did did you do that in terms of like taking advantage of each country's strengths in terms of talent pool, or did it just happen organically? Was there a method to being based here and pulling talent from this and there? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Definitely. So I
Yeah.
think how we've sort of built our co-founding team and core team is to really find the best people for each of the different components of what we're doing, as well as people who are aligned with like the vision and values of what we believe in. So that's kind of been the driving force in terms of bringing these people together. And yeah, I mean, we're hiring and growing our team. So constantly looking for people who believe in this sort of vision of a distributed cooperative economy, as well as providing the future of work where people really enjoy what they do. Everyone is more or less an entrepreneur and has the freedom and agency for what they enjoy.
So what skills are you looking for? Are you just looking for software developers, or what other industries are you looking for? And what countries do you find these pools of talent to mostly be in?
Extremely broad. So we've got we've got like a bunch of people in Berlin, in Dubai, in London, in Ibiza also. We've got a few people, and we're looking for community builders. We're looking for people who I guess are extremely open-minded and willing to kind of question or think about how things are done, and look at new ways of doing things. So we're very active in the blockchain and crypto ecosystem, which at the moment is still extremely new in the sense that there isn't a bunch of popular things or mainstream use of, similar to like the early internet. And I guess we're really excited to kind of bring this to the forefront and really use this super exciting piece of technology to empower people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. I just want to ask one or two more questions about just doing businesses in Asia in general. So you've set up in Bali, and you've mentioned other countries as well. How have you found Southeast Asia, or particularly Bali, to be in terms of ease of doing business or accommodating foreigners in foreign investments, or your visa situation? That whole process of deciding to come here, setting up a company as a foreigner and living here. And talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. So I think things flow extremely nicely here. So it's super fluid in terms of like the visa situation. The quality of living is also, in terms of like getting a beautiful place, in terms of getting a scooter or a car. Everything is just very easy. So if one was to move to, say, Berlin, or move to London or to Shanghai, and sort out all the visa process and everything, it can be super painful. And I think like so many friends are moving here in the next few weeks or the next few months.
Okay.
And process is just super seamless. It's extremely inexpensive. In terms of the company setup, I think it's very easy, but it's probably better to set up in a place like Singapore or Hong Kong, like structurally, and then operate from somewhere like Thailand or Bali in supporting that. Though, like for instance, we are speaking to like the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Investments to set up an entrepreneur and investor visa to make it even more easy to set up here.
Yeah. So for example, I don't know about Bali, but in Thailand, there are a few more boxes to check if you're a foreigner setting up here. For example, there's more capital required. You also, I think you also need a local partner for various businesses, unless you get approval from the Board of Investment. And in terms of your visa, you can only set up a business visa if you employ a certain amount of locals. So there's all these extra things to do as a foreigner in Thailand, and that does serve as sort of a challenge for people setting up business in Thailand. Is there anything like that in Bali where it's a bit more difficult compared to a local?
A little bit. So they do have these rules where you do need to hire locals, like so employ locals, and I guess there is a minimal capital requirement, but many of these things, like it's quite easy to satisfy. So I've actually done some business in Thailand, and it's actually much easier here in terms of the regulatory framework. And I think also the cost of doing business here is less than Thailand, even though like Thailand is amazing.
Yeah.
The community in both are also incredible. So places like Shanghai are a huge hub.
I understand the motivation behind, let's say, the Thai government on placing all these restrictions, because they want to make sure that money is pouring in and they're hiring talent and all like that. But sometimes it ends up being, more of an impediment. People end up going to other countries, or sometimes there's restrictions to, let's say, for example, like, a company is owned by a foreigner, is required to like hire four Thais. And so they would just hire warm bodies and would just be there, and there'd be no real innovation because they're just hiring people for the sake of checking boxes. So it kind of backfires in a way for Thailand, and it would be nice to see a little bit more, openness here in Thailand. But it seems like Bali, they're more welcoming to businesses like that.
I totally agree with you. It's the same thing in Singapore. So Singapore had a policy about 12 years ago where they were attracting foreign talent, as they described. And a lot of the locals were very annoyed because the people coming in were taking their jobs. So they implemented some of the rules you mentioned. The issue with that, though, is that many of the jobs the locals in Singapore didn't want to do. And they made it much more tricky to kind of innovate and experiment. And I think what you mentioned, like creating this environment for innovation and experimentation and making mistakes and also learning and then improving on, is so important, because that's where you really get things happening.
And also, like, when a country sees really talented foreigners coming in and taking over all the jobs, like, that should be a good thing. That should be a wake-up call for the locals to re-up their skills and educate themselves and try to compete. Now, when you have these restrictions over, it's like you foster complacency, and you just remain in your comfort zone, and you're not really able to compete with the world, because of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think, though, that like governments, they do need to support their local people. So in the case of Singapore, one thing I felt that it could improve is really nurturing the locals, because what would happen is someone would come in from Europe or the US, and then they'll be put on a pedestal. They'll be given lots of financing, and like local startups and innovations were treated as second class, which is quite surprising, because sometimes governments would like look at the local company as someone that they really want to succeed. But what I noticed in Singapore was they really treated foreign companies much better than sort of local ones. So I do think it's a combination of the two, in terms of attracting extremely talented people from abroad, as well as really giving an opportunity for the local to shine.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I guess there's a balancing act to be done on both ends, and basically creating an equal playing field for both foreigners and locals. So speaking of business, I think we got a lot to cover in terms of Unit.Ventures. I checked out your website. You guys are doing a lot of stuff here, marketplace, community, and token. So yeah, you have the floor on what you're doing here.
Definitely. So in terms of communities, what we're building is hubs in different cities. So we're active in about 30 cities at the moment, where we've done about 2,000 talks and sessions and meetups. So building up this community similar to, if you're familiar with Soho House or the World Economic Forum. These are like really tight-knit communities of people who sort of exchange ideas, working on solving problems and collaborating. And what we're focused on is seeing how we can create these hubs all around the world. So we've identified about 60 cities in Asia, 40 cities in Middle East and Africa, 50 in Europe, and 50 in the North and South America. And we're sort of planting seeds in different ones and giving an opportunity for people to be more supportive of one another and less competitive, more collaborative.
Okay.
And how we're doing that is we are building marketplaces. So if you look at Uber, Uber was a huge innovation in terms of connecting drivers and customers. Airbnb made it super easy for anyone with a spare room or apartment to kind of rent their place. There's a bunch of industries which there aren't platforms and units providing the technology, investing in them, as well as supporting people to sort of build marketplaces, and all done with the use of tokens.
Okay. Well, actually, you know what? Let's actually step back at a more higher level, and let's talk about like what is your mission statement here? What is Unit.Ventures seeking to affect and change?
So I guess underlying is solving the inequity in the world, the huge gap in wealth.
Okay. So you're seeing financial, economic inequality in the world, right? What do you think would be the cause of that, and therefore, how are you plugging Unit.Ventures into solving that?
Definitely. So fundamentally, why we have this huge gap is because the people who have money are the ones who start companies or invest in companies.
Yep.
So they're the owners of things. And then everyone else is kind of just getting by. They're getting a salary, they're getting like different contracts, they're doing work and getting paid. And that just causes the gap to be bigger because, the owners, the founders, the investors are getting more money. And the people who are getting the salary are just kind of getting by saving a bit of money. And
fixed salary, yeah.
Fixed salary, or even like so charging more each time, but it's very incremental, But the people who own things.
Yeah. It's probably getting even worse now because of globalization and you're outsourcing to really cheap countries. So that's actually getting a lot worse, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the key is to see how to give some of the ownership to the customers and to the employees, to everyone else.
Okay. So explain how it would pan out in Unit.Ventures.
Definitely. So what Unit provides is the technology for anyone to issue their own token. So like, for instance, this podcast could have its own token, and then all the viewers of it, instead of being like participants or customers in enjoying the content, they could buy these tokens of this podcast and feel that this podcast is theirs. They have a sense of ownership of it. Or if let's say you started a restaurant, or if you started a gym or a supermarket or a nightclub, you could issue tokens, and all the community, the people going to your establishment, they can buy a piece of it. And then instead of there being two sides, one side with the founders and the investors, the other side with the customers and the employees, like everyone is an owner in these businesses. And it makes the rich, the founders and investors, more on an absolute level, but then everyone else gets a piece of the pie. So the pie, instead of being 100% owned by the founders and the investors, it's owned maybe 80% or 70%. And that piece is worth more, but at least the rest of the pie is shared by everyone else. So that's going to solve the inequity.
Okay, so it gives small businesses or freelancers the ability to raise money, more democratized. You don't have to like go through an IPO or whatever, or go through private equity.
Angel investors,
So it gives smaller people the opportunity to raise funds easily, and anyone who believes in them, the ability to have equity. So what would be the relationship between, let's say, me, the podcast owner, and the person that buys my tokens? What do I need to offer in exchange? What is the dynamic?
So it's really up to the creator to decide. So
Mm-hmm.
the creator of the token could say, if you own this amount of tokens, you can vote and decide what kind of content I produce. Or you
Okay.
could say, you get X amount, like an hour of my time with 10 tokens,
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say, decide what questions, you could say part of the advertising revenue gets used to buy the token. So it's really up to you as the creator to kind of experiment and innovate. And
Mm-hmm.
like touching on the point that you just mentioned, about raising financing, like unless you're in the finance world, you have a track record, you know a bunch of people who have like money and resources, it's very tough to raise money. So if
Yep.
someone wanted to start a restaurant, they want to start a startup, like it's almost impossible. Like the fund I used to work at, we would get maybe 3,000 pitches a year and invest
Mm-hmm.
in 10 companies. So if you think that's 2,990 people, like
Mm-hmm.
companies who are basically told no. So it's lots
Yeah,
of
yeah,
innovation there.
yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it really opens up a lot of opportunity, but also it to me listening to it right now, it does sound really broad, and it might even be daunting for some people. Like for example, like gosh, what terms should I offer, and are they going to be fair, and are they going to bite me in the back, in the future, or as an investor, how do I make sure that I'm getting into a good investment? How would one look at this in terms of a framework, or how to get educated in how to set up this dynamic?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that we're focused on at Unit is building this framework. So
Oh,
like so if a supporter, contributor, and investor would kind of maybe buy your podcast tokens with the assumption that it's probably not going to be worth anything, and they're just going to
mm,
give money to kind of support the cause. So that's like the kind of expectation. It's not like this is going to make me a huge return, it's going to be worth a lot. And tokens, when they're created, will have the expectation that this isn't going to make money. And then if it
oh,
maintains some level of sort of stability and growth, then it maybe moves from an F rating to an E rating, then a D, then a C. And like having this kind of framework be created is so important. And then from the creator side, I think one needs to feel like not so much pressure, but rather like the ability to kind of experiment, similar to the internet. People used to think of this internet as, I used to think of the internet as like a really scary thing. Like you wouldn't put your credit card on the internet because it's
mm,
scams. You wouldn't create a business on the internet because internet businesses don't make money. Like you look at the
yeah,
dot-com bubble. So it's
yeah.
like it's really like a series of innovations, and it's just so early now. There's so few uses of tokens at the moment. It's nowhere near mainstream adoption. But people who kind of experiment with it will really reap the benefits, like applying technology to stocks and shares.
Okay. Actually, talk more about that tier system of FEDC, because that's starting to make more sense. Where I start off as a random podcast, and so you invest in me at your own risk. It's charity at this point. But if I do succeed, my token matures to a certain level that could actually result in a return. That actually makes a bit more sense now, because when there's a fixed tier system, could you elaborate on that in more detail?
Absolutely. So, for instance, Joe Rogan, he took about 8 years between his first podcast on the Joe Rogan show to when Spotify gave him $100 million contract.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of people who kind of shared the word of Joe Rogan, like, this guy's amazing. I learned so much. He introduced me to things. It's people who spent a lot of time listening to the podcast. A lot of people were on the show, but the only person who benefited from that $100 million deal was probably Joe Rogan. And I don't think he even got any investors, so just him. But there's a lot of people that
Mm,
were instrumental to that success. So if he had created a token from the beginning, he could have gave some tokens to all the people who were on his show. He
yeah, yeah.
first 100 people who listen, like, or maybe 10 people listen to his first show. He's gonna be like, guys, thank you so much for your time and listening to my first show. Like, here's some sort of appreciation of your time. And then it gives an opportunity for people to be more supportive. Like, for instance, if someone listened to this and they shared it on social media, or they wrote a nice review, that could be some token. So they feel a sense of ownership over this. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. I mean, I don't want, we're making a case study about my podcast, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that actually makes sense now. So it kind of like is a incentive system to bring people on board. Like if I invite you on my podcast, I'm like, hey, would you like 5 shares of my token? Just have it, right? And then maybe in the future, or if someone writes a nice review, maybe I give them 1 token and they can keep it. Can they trade it? Can they trade it in an open market?
Yep. So it's really up to you as the creator to define these rules. So it's kind of like building a website. Websites used to cost like $1 million in the 90s, and you need to find like a computer expert. You need to hire a team. You need to set up your own servers, and then the cost of building a website kind of decreased. More people had computers. Yeah. So like creating a token a few years ago, you used to cost a lot of money. Now with Unit, it costs nothing, and it's super easy to create. People can kind of experiment. Yeah. Even like individual personal tokens. So I could have a Michael token, and then I could give you some. I could give some of my family some. I could give some of my friends some. And let's say if I was a musician and I became super successful, they wouldn't just say, I knew Michael when he was a musician, when nobody listened to his music. Yep. I was the only one in this sort of performance place, and now look, he's playing at Wembley or he's playing at huge stadiums. And they won't just be saying that they were my friend, but they would have had some tokens of myself and then be able to benefit from that like creation of value. So that's
gotcha. So it's not just equity or share in your venture or whatever. It can also be a collectible. It's almost like, I meet you and I gave you my autograph for some reason and you just kept it. And then I became suddenly really famous 5 years from now. And then you can frame that autograph or auction it off or whatever, because it's like it's a collectible.
Definitely. And I could even say part of my net worth goes to these tokens. I could say part of my yearly salary or my yearly earnings go to these Michael tokens. So it's really up to the creator to kind of define the terms and experiment with it.
Okay. Yeah. I see the value proposition of this entire token scheme now. Yeah. Did you want to say something? You were laughing.
I think it's amazing. Just so few people sort of see the how groundbreaking this is going to be. Like the internet really transformed the access to information. Before the internet, if I wanted to learn about something, I would go to maybe an expert like you, and I'll say, "Hey Jack, can you teach me about this?" I would need to go to a library, then spend hours there looking at different books, finding a few lines to kind of teach me about a particular topic. Then the internet came out of Wikipedia and all of these different websites. That was really happy. Then the mobile phone, that really helped with communication. Before, like if you met someone, you could write down their email address, you could write down their phone number, but then communication wasn't super fluid. Then with different apps, communication is just seamless. So where really tokens come in is similar to how the internet transformed access to information. The mobile phone improved access to communication. This is going to really solve access to value and having value flow around. Okay. So I think it's going to be even more profound than both the internet and the mobile phone. And it's just so early.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Lots of questions, but let me know when, let's say you're hitting like the 5-minute mark when you need to go, because I definitely want to get that tour. But before that, so obviously Unit.Ventures is a company. You got bills to pay because you got staff all around the world. So obviously you guys really need to make money out of this. So how are you profiting off of this? Are you collecting a percentage from all this?
Definitely. So we take a service fee on the products and services being sold. So we have like a few different marketplaces, one for like buying art, one for yoga, one for coaching, one for developers, for designers. And every time like a customer sort of purchases something from a provider, there's service fees being taken. So that's kind of like where like the underlying business or token model behind it. Similar to when you order an Uber, you pay 25% service fee.
To Uber, yeah.
When you book an Airbnb, there's also a service fee happening.
Okay, so you act as the service provider.
Exactly. And the nice thing is that the service provider is not owned by us, the founders and the investors. It's owned by all of the drivers, the customers. So Uber sort of started in 2010. It became worth $80 billion in 8 years. It went public on the stock exchange. They have about 40,000 drivers.
Mhm.
So, 2 million drivers. So $40,000 per driver of value was created, but none of it went to the drivers or to the customers. So we're showing how in a marketplace like Airbnb or Uber, the drivers or the host or the customers get some piece of the value being created.
So not only are you enabling people to issue their own tokens, you are issuing your own tokens.
Exactly.
So let's say let's say back to my podcast example again. I issue my tokens to other people, but I can also hold your tokens.
Definitely. Yep. So we have
And
unit token. That's
yeah,
like a parent token.
yeah.
And then we have a few industry tokens. So we basically have like a token for the art world. And we're
Yeah.
getting some of the leading art collectors and the leading artists to buy into them
Mm-hmm.
or to hold them. And then
Yeah.
that kind of provides the credibility and the recognition for this art industry token. And yeah, gets products and services being bought and sold using
Yeah.
this industry currency.
Yeah. Okay. This is obviously very crypto related. It's in the crypto industry, and I've dabbled in the crypto industry a lot. And one space I've been into is the NFT space, the non-fungible token space, and they were talking about social tokens, right? It's very similar to that, isn't it?
To an extent, I mean, I feel that NFTs and non-fungible tokens, they aren't as interesting for me as fungible tokens, just because it's harder to get the liquidity for it in the sense that if I have an NFT, it's not clear like what it's worth because it's not bought and sold as often as a normal token.
Right.
So
Right.
for me, like fungible tokens are much more exciting than non-fungible tokens.
Okay. And this one unit is obviously a fungible token because it's just tokens.
Exactly. People buying and selling it, people using it to sort of exchange for products and services. It's being backed by the service fees,
Right.
similar to equity in the project.
Yeah. Now, with tokens and with the crypto space, also comes with the dark side of it being people buying and selling out of speculation and pump and dumps and all like that. How do you also foresee unit token suddenly being used as a speculative instrument? And if so, would that sort of kind of would that be a threat or jeopardize the credibility of the project if people start pumping and dumping it, and then there's all this volatility and people trying to get involved for the actual utility of it have to like hedge their bets and be afraid of it dumping and all like that? How do you see that happening?
That's pretty much the whole crypto space at the moment in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
being entirely speculatively driven, needing more actual underlying problems to be solved, products and services to be offered, value actually created. So with Unit, the way we look at it is very similar to a traditional company. So with a traditional company, you look at what are the assets it owns. So does it own anything? And what is the multiple of the profit it makes? That's kind of like how like traditional companies are valued.
Yep.
So with Unit, we think of our token as just being a multiple of the service fees that we make.
Yep.
So if we have 100 million in like transactions happening this year, we make about 5 million in fees from that, so 5%, and 5 million in fees with a 20 PE ratio, like 20 times of the profit it makes a year, gives it $100 million valuation. So
Okay.
we're super clear that this is like the service fees we make. This is what the token should be valued, and if it's valued at maybe $400 million, then like we publicly would say, and we think it's overvalued at the moment. We're not at that stage. Like,
Okay.
yeah, and I believe that all tokens will come to this realization where it does need like some sort of
Intrinsic value assessment.
exactly, because internet companies, people used to say it's an internet company. It doesn't need to make money. It doesn't need to create value. You just need more users, and then a bigger company is going to buy you, or you go on the stock exchange and you're done. Then you're internet millionaires. And people in the crypto space, they feel, oh, you don't have to generate real value. You just need to get it distributed. Tokens are a bit different, and it's gonna get to a stage. I think there's gonna be another big bubble, bigger than 2017. But then after that bubble, it's gonna be really the tokens that kind of create real value. So, this podcast is real value. It's people enjoying the content. They're learning a lot from it. They're getting inspired, and that's what needs to happen to the token space. It needs to kind of deliver real value.
Okay. Do you have any competitors or threats?
I don't think so at the moment. It's just so early in the space. And yeah, I mean, there are a few similar platforms for issuing tokens, but I feel that we feel that they don't really see the future of the economy as like the same way we do. And then in terms of the marketplace side, we hope that there'll be more competition just because, we want this reality to happen. We want the future of work to be where, if I was working for a company, I lost my job or I don't enjoy, I resign. I don't need to make a CV and apply to a bunch of places. I just need to create a profile on one of the unit marketplaces. And then I wake up tomorrow morning and I have a bunch of messages from people wanting to hire me or wanting to work with me. And then I'm not just making my money by doing work for people, but also holding a portfolio of 100 different tokens, like this podcast token, like maybe a jet token, maybe the villa I'm in, like a token of these places. Yep. So that's kind of the future we imagine.
Got it. So talk about where you are now in terms of your roadmap and when you expect to, roll out all of this to the general public. And then I guess you can lead that into giving us a tour of Unit.Ventures HQ, or at least the community. I don't know if it's the HQ or just a model community.
Thanks. I'm actually in my villa at the moment, so I love to maybe give a tour another time if that's okay.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
But yeah, I'd love to show you around. Like, it's amazing what we've built here. Like,
okay,
the longest pool in Bali is 80 meters. We have co-working space for like 400 people.
I love how you say I'm in my villa. You wouldn't get to say that if you're like in Berlin or in Shanghai or something, right? That really speaks to the quality of living in Bali. Oh, I'm just streaming from my villa. Yeah.
Really awesome. Yeah. Okay, so where are we at the moment? So we have like maybe about 25,000 people in our community, like using our platforms actively in about 30 cities. Our platforms are up and running. Our most popular platforms are the one for coaching. So people looking for a business coach, a life coach.
So it's active right now.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
We're growing, and yeah, actively growing. I can show you a bunch of our apps here.
Sure.
We have like one for artists. So we can kind of have one for personal trainers, for event organizers, for handyman, for hairdressers. So yeah, our coaching one's really popular. Our yoga platform, so booking a private yoga teacher or a group yoga teacher. Our developer platform, our designer platform, our marketing expert platform. So these are the ones that are doing really well. And I guess several others, like for instance, the bike rental or bike purchase platform, our property platform, are still quite early, and we're kind of working hard on finding good partners to help us grow these, or sort of investing in people to kind of work together on that.
Okay. Speaking of all these different skills, in my last podcast with John, we talked about tech disrupting the labor force and having mass unemployment. Just maybe want to get your thoughts on what you see the future of work to be. You mentioned coaches and yoga teachers, and where do you think the jobs will be at in the future?
I think much more creative, and I think people would work a lot less, or think of work as not something that they have to do, or like something that they really enjoy. If you looked at maybe the early 1900s, a lot of people were working in farms. So like maybe 30 to 60%, in different countries in the world were working in agriculture. And then machines kind of came and replaced a lot of the jobs. A lot of the plowing, a lot of the seed sowing were done by machines. And then people sort of migrated to working in offices. And then I think one thing COVID has done this year, it's accelerated the migration from working in offices to working in places with a lot of nature, working from home, working from anywhere really. And I think the future is where people work like 3-day weeks. So it'll be like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The work will be much more effective in terms of like not doing things which aren't creating as much value. Companies will be a lot smaller. So instead of big corporations, it'll be much more distributed. There'll be a lot more entrepreneurs. So access to financing will be a lot easier. So if someone wants to start a company, they would start off with a very small amount of money, maybe a few $100s or a few $1,000s or tens of thousands, just to kind of get started. If they show it to be successful, then more of the community can kind of support them. Yeah. So yeah, these are
Do you see this transition from repetitive day-to-day work to creativity as a challenge? Because at least for me, in Thailand, yeah, the education system here really has killed creativity in general, and all with rote learning and in a lot of societies. And you know, even though we it's great that jobs are going to be more creative, but there's a huge bulk of the population that are doing mundane, repetitive work. It's going to be a huge challenge to them. How do you see this transition happening?
I don't think it's actually going to be that tough. I think one key piece of creativity is confidence. So, if someone believes that they can do something,
Yeah.
then they'll be confident enough to sort of experiment. So, like when I left Singapore to move to London, I remember like one thing I sort of needed to work on was my confidence. So being
Yeah.
able to kind of talk to people, being able to make mistakes and feel okay with it, be able to experiment. And then, when you have the confidence to make mistakes, that's when people get creative. So I think
Yeah.
sort of creating an environment where people feel, it's okay to try something out and it not to work, and it's
Hmm.
okay to do things that nobody else is doing. It's okay to kind of just experiment. So I think it's just a matter of time before communities and environments are created so that people feel much more comfortable to give it a shot. Because at the moment, so I grew up in Singapore where arguably the school system apparently doesn't foster creativity, where it's extremely academic. It's very much exam oriented and based. I feel what's needed is just a very supportive and constructive environment where people aren't judging one another. People are giving it a shot. Like for instance, starting this podcast, it's something extremely creative. You're building something, and that takes a lot of confidence. It takes the ability to kind of go, I don't care if people don't agree with what I create. I um, I believe in creating like something which I believe to your value. So if everyone in the population had this confidence and belief, and then having people sort of support it. So whether it's like myself get on like having the honor to be on the show, people like listening to it, I think that's really exciting because I think in the next 5 years, people are going to realize, instead of it being zero sum, where if let's say you do well, it's at the expense of me. It's more like if you do well, that's great because now I'm going to be inspired and I'm going to support you and I'm going to do well too. And yeah, that's just needs to happen because one big improvement which could happen in society is one where everyone realize it's one where it's like a bigger pie, sort of allows everyone to benefit.
Yeah, that's so true about the confidence thing because I mean, for me, I've struggled with that a lot with coming out with my own stuff because fear of criticism or having to get it right immediately. And you realize that in the end, people are actually quite supportive of you when you want to do something, and you can always pivot and tweak as you go. If you look at my channel, the stuff I've done, I've pivoted so many times, and you realize that what people are supportive of that. And yeah, I really thank you for coming on the show. I'm looking at the time here because I do want to be respectful of your schedule. So maybe finish with how people can find out more about yourself and Unit.Ventures and maybe participate, and any
Def-
other things that you want to promote.
Definitely. So if you go to unit.ventures, that shows some of the marketplaces that we're working on. If you go to unitnetwork.org, that will also show you some of the different marketplaces. If you want to get in touch, I'm at Michael on Telegram. So just at MICHAEL. Also on WhatsApp, it's +44 7446 773561. Or my email is m@mihealy.com. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I've had so much help and like so many people have really been instrumental to sort of my personal growth and my journey. So excited to see how I can help or support anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'll put all those contact details in the description of the videos and the podcast with them. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. And also maybe a final thing. So we're also running like a unit masters program.
Mm.
It's sort of empowering people to sort of be a successful entrepreneur or provider. It's just a 6-week long program. We currently work with a lot of providers in our marketplace. So if anyone's interested in sort of applying or being a part, like it's kind of like a fellowship. We start every 2 months and it runs 6 weeks with got super inspiring speakers and lots of events. Yeah, so I think that would be something nice.
So where could someone find out about that?
So it's unitmasters.org, unitmasters.org, unitmasters.org. And
Great.
the application is there. And
Great.
yeah, we would love to see how we can sort of provide support to people who really,
Nice. All right, Michael, thank you so much for being on. This was really eye-opening about, you know, the tokens and the democratization of equity and all like that. And hey, man, when all COVID clears up, maybe you can give me a tour in person of the place.
Absolutely. And yeah, excited to swing by Thailand. Please come to Bali. Looking forward to it.
I would love to. I've always wanted to come, and it's just always been pushed back. So I have more of a reason now. You're in Ubud, is that right?
I'm in Canggu at the moment, but
Canggu.
in Ubud also. That's where our village is, and we're
that's where it is.
Also here in Canggu.
Okay,
So,
great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.